Thank you all for joining us for our Solar and Energy Efficiency Workgroup August meeting. Our presentation today is on electric vehicle updates by Kathy Knoop, who is the Energy Innovation Designer for Arizona Public Service. So Kathy, thank you so much for joining us. Kathy is well known, I think, in the EV and energy field and the utilities. She's previously been with SRP and now with APS. And she's going to be talking to us today about the latest activities associated with electric vehicle adoption, charging station growth, and new technology and vehicles. And I think Energy Innovation Advisor is really kind of an interesting title. So you'll have to tell us a little bit more about how they came up with that. She has been in the utility business for almost 30 years and has worked on supporting utility environmental compliance and sustainability programs, including greenhouse gas emissions analysis and reporting. She also serves on the Phoenix Environmental Quality and Sustainability Committee, which is great. So she is able to advocate at the local level, which is exciting. She is from Phoenix, so a native, attended ASU. So we really appreciate her support there and holds a bachelor's degree in chemistry and a master's in environmental program. And so I know many of you already know Kathy from her attendance at many different meetings. She's also been integral in the electrification, the statewide electrification transportation planning process. So with that, I just want to welcome Kathy. And if you'd like to add any more to your introduction or tell people about your background, please do. Otherwise, feel free to share your screen and we can get started.
Great, I will. Yeah, I just want to know if Kevin is coming to this meeting from an electric airplane or not, because I see his background as an airplane. That's awesome. It's good to see you again.
Absolutely, fully electric.
Yes, that's
but
right.
You got to make this quick. I only got about 60 minutes of flight time.
Well, I didn't include electric aerial transport in my slide deck, but if you look back on the Consumer Electronics Show, there is a personal electric helicopter thing from General Motors, which was pretty cool. Yeah, nice to virtually meet all of you. I do know some of you are new to me, but yeah, I've been working on EVs for quite a while now. And so Karen asked me to come give a presentation to your team. And when I was thinking about the presentation, because electric transportation runs the gamut, like it's huge. So what I could do would be to start out with a little bit of introduction to the technology and then go from there and ask me any questions you want and we can diverge. And I'm going to turn off my video because I keep getting a pop-up message. My bandwidth is low. Hopefully you guys can all see that. Somebody text me if you can't. Otherwise, I'm going to move forward with this slideshow, give you some EV background, talk about EVs in Arizona, what some other cities are doing in the statewide TE plan. There's those of you on this call who probably know better than I what other cities are doing. And I don't know that we want to get in a huge discussion of regulatory issues around Arizona and the state. But let me start out by saying in Arizona, the cities and the towns are going to be the leaders in this transition to electrification. There's literally no question in my mind that this leadership is going to come from you all. And as a utility, we want to do everything we can to support you. As just somebody who's a huge EV advocate, I want to do everything I can to support you. But you guys are going to be the go-to people. And I'm looking forward to a federal infrastructure bill that provides the support that you guys need. Sort of a basic thing when I talk about electric vehicles, what I mean are either battery electric vehicles, 100% battery electric, they only run on the lithium ion battery, or a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, which has a high voltage lithium ion battery, but smaller in size and an accompanying gas tank. So you can take it for longer distances. Both of these types of vehicles plug into the grid, as opposed to say a Toyota Prius that does have an electric motor, but it recharges through regeneration and it does not plug into the grid. Somebody the other day mentioned that they were speaking to somebody new to EVs and they were surprised to know that there's more than one charging level and there was more than one charging plug or cord. So I thought it would be worth taking a little bit of time just to go through the idea that there's 3 charging levels out there, 4 different charging connectors, and vehicles can't necessarily use all connectors or all charging levels. One thing all the vehicles can do, though, is use this J1772 basic charging connector. They all have one of these. A Tesla does not, but it has an adapter, so it can use it. But this is the ubiquitous way that every EV charges their vehicle. And when you buy a new EV, in the beginning, it came with a 120 power cord, and that's how you could charge your car. You plug it into a 120 outlet in the garage or out on your carport or wherever, and you could charge up your car, but very slowly. But this was initially what came with cars, and now newer electric vehicles, as you buy them, are actually coming with 240 outlet charging cords, which is level 2 charging. And that can be done at home or businesses, and there's some examples here on the left. They can be hardwired, or it can be as simple as a NEMA outlet, a dryer plug, if you will. You can buy these on Amazon. I would caution you on Amazon to be sure that they are UL certified. There's some fake stamps out there that they meet safety standards. Otherwise, places like APS and SRP both offer discounts on certain types of smart charging stations, just like smart thermostats, where the utility may have the ability to either understand charging habits or manage different charging levels during times of peak grid usage. That's a smart charger, and you can find some discounts online at both the SRP website and the APS website. Also, the level 2 uses the J1772 connector or a Tesla with an adapter, but it's a much quicker rate of charge. A recent survey in California showed that 1 in 5 people who bought a battery electric vehicle, when they were done with their lease or after a few years, did not replace it with another battery electric vehicle because they were only using level 1 charging at home, and it took too long to charge their vehicle. And if you think about it, the idea that you've got a 300-mile range vehicle that would take you, 16 hours to charge up really seems ridiculous, unless you're sort of doing it every night or you're working from home like I am. And heavens, I could probably charge my car 23.5 hours a day for all I drive these days. But at any rate, level 2 is really going to be the way to go in the future. Electric vehicles are being built with the capability to charge at higher levels, and I'll talk about that in a second. So level 3, and it's really DC fast charging, but level 3 is an easy way to refer it to. And those are the on the highway charging stations where you can stop, for 30 minutes and get your vehicle charged up. Unlike level 1 and level 2 charging, which is very consistent, it will go up to whatever amperage is on the breaker circuit that you put that charging station in. The speed in which you charge with level 3 charging is really determined on not only the vehicle acceptance rate, but how full the battery already is. So it's very interesting to look at that. But if you pulled up to a DC fast charger and you've already got 80% capacity in your battery and you plug in and you want thinking, well, I'm going to get to 100% in 10 minutes. That's not going to happen because there's too much resistance in that battery to accept that much power quickly. However, if you pull in there with 10 to 20% range available on your battery, it will charge up very quickly, up to about 80%, and then it will slow down and it'll start trickling off. Just one of those interesting things about DC fast charging. I've got some pictures here of some Tesla stations, supercharger stations, and they charge at really high ranges. And I've got 24 to 1,000 kilowatts, but for public charging on the highway, it's really 24 to 350 kilowatts of charging is about the max. And I think the Porsche Taycan is the only one now that charges at 350. Now, when we talk about buses and heavier duty vehicles, they can charge at 350 plus some, but I'll talk about that in a second. These are the 3 different connectors that are used for DC fast charging. The Tesla connector, which charges in all the other different ways as well. CHAdeMO, which is typically on Asian vehicles like Mitsubishi, the Nissan Leaf, the old Nissan Leaf. The new Nissan Area is going to come with the one below, which is a CCS or combo connector. And I kind of liken this to Betamax and VHS tapes back in the day, right? So for a while, CHAdeMO and CCS have been kind of competing with each other. Interesting thing about CHAdeMO is it's the only standard technology capable of vehicle to grid with a light duty vehicle, and that's the Nissan Leaf. But they'll be working on it for these other technologies as well. And I suspect the ability is probably there and just hasn't been standardized and really addressed the safety component of that. But the CCS or combo connector, that is on all the German and the American vehicles that are capable of fast charging. So I guess it's important to know when you buy an electric vehicle, your customers, your fleet, whoever it may be, that you know what type of station that you can charge at. Talked a little bit about power levels. I guess this would be what they call, what would keep the utility up at night. On the left-hand side for the light duty charging, fast charging or DC charging has started out about 50 kilowatts, and that was the standard. The EVgo stations were all 50, and they built the cars to accept 50, except Tesla bumped up there and they went to 90. And then Tesla's increased to 120, then 150, then 250. And this CCS standard is capable of 350 kW charging. So that's light duty, and that's pretty quick, pretty heavy duty charging. It doesn't, obviously the higher the power level, the shorter the charge duration. But then when you talk about medium and heavy duty vehicles, I'm not sure if somebody from Flagstaff is on here, but when you talk about electric buses and, for example, the idea of doing on-route charging, where you pull into a charger, maybe it is an overhead pantograph or something like that, reaches down and connects with the bus. It's about 350 kW, and the buses stay there for 5 to 9 minutes, and they get charged back up again. There's groups called Charlin in the Netherlands. A lot of people are involved in developing standards called the megawatt charging system. And when you think about what it's going to take in the future for Class 8 semi-trucks to cross the country in electric semi-trucks, they're going to need to charge at extremely high levels rather quickly. Time is money in the trucking business. So they're developing, I think they've safely tested 1 megawatt or 1,000 kilowatts already, but they're working towards 3,000 kilowatts. And some of you on this call may know this information more than I do. This is certainly not my area of expertise, but I do participate in EPRI calls where they update us on what's going on with that. So it's an interesting idea that you could think of an electric vehicle truck stop of the future that has 10, 3,000 kilowatt charging stations that get used throughout the day and night for an hour or something like that. So it's something interesting to think about how a utility or any electric delivery service would address that. And of course, the first thing comes to mind is stationary batteries. So you have that capability available, but it's a technology they're working on. It's a technology as a utility we're going to have to learn how to address and support. Talking about charging stations, of course, there's none of those really heavy duty charging stations yet, although the Electrify America stations are 3,000. Let me go back and answer Jenny's question. The graph more. Is the present heavy duty charging around only 270 and accepted to go to 3,000? So yeah, so right now in 2021, the currently accepted standards for heavy duty charging are 270. I really think that that's this little one, CCS 350. So there is 350 that are out there. But this Chojai and the megawatt charging system have not really been introduced to the public. They've just had some demonstration stations. But yeah, we expect it to jump to 3,000 kW once all the safety standards have been addressed. I would suggest that if you go on LinkedIn, look up char.in, Charin, and that is the entity that's working on this system, and they'll have more information on their website. When I talked to I think it was the MAG Transportation Committee a month or so ago and another group, If you're interested, I think all the city folks, and it's like you guys on the call, we're interested on where charging stations are. And I apologize to those of you outside of the metro area. I'll have the next slide, will cover the whole state a little broader. But within the metro area, you can see where there's sort of charging stations concentrated. It's interesting that Tesla has the large highway supercharger stations, but they also have banks of stations in the Valley metro area. So if you think about the Arizona Biltmore, 24th and Camelback, on the backside of where that parking garage is, just on the surface area, they have a bank of about 20 charging stations. And I think that they're 120 kilowatts a piece. And they also have solar on that. So they get really busy. You'll see a lot of vehicles there, but it's a great place to go. We looked at that. That is an SRP service territory when I was there. And you noticed that the peak demand was actually over the lunch hour when they were all taken up. But because they have solar, that peak demand really got brought down by quite a bit. And then in the evening, around 5 o'clock, happy hour, dinner time, was then the second peak was. And because the solar had knocked off that late in the day, it didn't have as much of a positive impact on the overall peak charging during that day. So it's very interesting to look at how well utilized they are. Clearly, Teslas are more utilized probably than any of the other stations, simply because 50% of the EVs in Arizona are Teslas. There's going to be more. Obviously, you've heard the F-150 Lightning's been announced. There's the Volkswagen ID.4. There's a lot more electric vehicles being available for purchase in Arizona, which is a pretty good thing. This is just a list of how many stations there currently are from PlugShare. And I think probably kind of the top 20 cities, they're located in Maricopa County. But if you look across the state and across the US, this is the Alt Fuels database, which is a good place to go. And I would suggest, if you're interested for your city, to go there and then zoom in on your city, because it'll give you far deeper detail. But clearly they're clustered in the Valley metro area, in Tucson and Flagstaff, a few in some of the smaller cities. If you look at California, based on this large map, tons of charging stations in California. They do also have a lot of funds to utilize for that. They have a very positive regulatory environment from both the state and their Public Utility Commission. They also have a low carbon fuel credit, where the utilities would get money for selling energy for transportation fuel, and then they could use the proceeds of that to then put back into more EV positive programs, encouraging adoption. They're at the point now where they are spending a lot of time and money in programs specifically dedicated towards low income, underserved communities, communities of color, communities where there's high pollution, which is really a great thing that they've focused on that. And there's a lot of agencies such as Forth, EV Noir, Velos, that are working really hard to bring in more equity into the transportation electrification scene, I guess you would call it. We look at where there are EVs, and it's hard to kind of sometimes talk about this. There's 42,000 in Arizona, but there's far less in New Mexico, but there's like 800,000 in California. So California really is exceeding the whole nation in EV adoption. But this time last year, there was, 30-some thousand, the low 30s. So the pace has really picked up over the last 8-9 months, I would say. Phoenix is, of course, leading, Scottsdale and Chandler, Phoenix being the biggest city in Arizona. In some of the backup slides, I did normalize it a little bit to kind of normalize for population. And it's a little surprising on how many EVs there are per 1,000 people population. So Phoenix, I'm sorry, Mark, steps back out when you go per 1,000 population. But they're interesting statistics to look at, and I think it's helpful to know where the EVs are. Oh, I didn't put it in the backup slides. I put it out front. Yeah, so Tolleson, very small population. I think there's 7,000 people there, but they have quite a few electric vehicles registered. And I'm not certain why. One of the things when I look at EV registrations, and Chandler has hundreds of Chrysler Pacifica plug-in hybrids registered in Chandler. And those are all of the Waymo self-driving electric vehicle vans, but I don't think that they plug them in very much. Just as a comparison, one of the things, and I didn't say it on the slide about level 1 charging, but I think of level 1 charging as just leaving your blow dryer on for about 10 hours to charge your car. It's about how I would compare it. But, you could also consider it the swimming pool or your washer, something like that. But one of the things that's scary about a utility, and the idea that we'll talk about projected EV adoption in a few minutes. If there's 1 million or 1.5 million EVs in Arizona by 2030, it's really interesting to think that also means that people aren't going to have just one electric vehicle. They're going to be driving 2 electric vehicles. Like all their cars will all be EVs. And I think at SRP, when we surveyed, about 13% of the EV community already had 2 electric vehicles, which was interesting to know. So if they're charging those 2 electric vehicles at the same time, and they're charging them at 6 kW a piece, that is almost the same amount of energy as the entire household is using. So the goal is to move that charging off peak, either overnight or in the middle of the day during solar, because perhaps at that time everybody's air conditioning isn't running, or they're not all home from work cooking dinner in their oven. But it really makes sense that we try to, because it's such a potentially heavy load, move that off peak. And utilities are certainly coming up with programs and ideas and pricing schemes to encourage that. And I think that, from a city's part, education and outreach campaigns help that as well. Have an EV, charge it overnight. If you have solar and you're working from home, charge your car in the middle of the day. Find ways to do that. I think for you guys, for cities, when you're looking at sustainability and how can I move towards a more sustainable future, and we already have RECs and we're already doing recycling and these other things, is the idea of, well, how do we transition our own fleet or other type vehicles that we use towards electric, and what's available? And I will say there are electric garbage trucks available, electric municipal buses. There's not a lot being used in Arizona. I think Flagstaff is starting a pilot. I believe Sedona will. And I think there's 1 or 2 electric school buses in Phoenix. They do cost a little more. There's a lot of savings in fuel. The challenge down here in the valley is just the heat. The heat load drains the battery quickly. And the fact that, say, for example, Phoenix is 40 miles long. So pretty long drive routes. We've all heard of Amazon moving their delivery fleet to electric, and they're moving forward with that across the United States. UPS is also moving forward to that, and I believe FedEx is as well. So we're going to start seeing more of these vehicles being built and delivered. I think as a country, we're working on battery plants, we're working on sourcing.
Kathy, I think we're losing you a little bit.
Advanced Clean Transportation conference is in a week or 2, and that's where a lot of these companies go to show their new electric vehicles. It's very interesting. You might look and see if you can attend that, or attend it virtually if you're interested in electrifying some of the bigger fleet vehicles. Yeah, Tucson does have a few electric buses. Tucson Electric Power helped work that program out for them. So I did put this for the MAG Transportation Committee, talking about, to the mayors about electrification. I pulled this down from the website. I'm not a city employee, so I'm not that familiar with how a city can utilize federal funding grants to help expand transportation electrification. But you guys probably know that. And there's a lot of information out there, and hopefully there will be more money coming forth. I have to say, Austin Energy, which is a subsidiary of the city of Austin, it's a municipal power company, is doing amazing work on the electric transportation front, and both putting in charging stations, coming up with very innovative rate plans. and strong education outreach and ride and drive events. I'm pretty impressed with what they're doing. I'm not that familiar with what's going on with Houston or Seattle, but I have talked to some few folks in the business saying, you know, who's got strong EV policies, and these are some folks that they talk to. So if you know anybody there and you want to talk to them about what they're doing, I suggest you reach out. We just got done with the statewide transportation electrification plan. I saw that Autumn from WRA is on the call, and Danae, who's here with us today, was very involved in putting together the statewide plan. And the reason the plan was put together was because of a directive from the Corporation Commission that directed Tucson Electric Power and APS to put together a plan. So it was kind of a cross between a utility plan and a statewide plan. And I believe Autumn filed a letter saying, you know, the point of a statewide plan is for the state or the state energy office to lead that. But we can't wait for that to happen. So we did convene stakeholders, talked about potential scenarios for EV adoption, talked about what would be great opportunities for different entities to work on things like this. Some of the suggestions about growing EV adoption are there. I don't think any of these things are surprises to anybody. From a city standpoint, building codes, which apparently Tucson has already adopted EV-friendly building codes, are one example. And I realize that can also be a challenge because you're dealing with home builders and new construction who are saying, well, that's going to increase the cost of our building material, competition, whatever it may be. So it's always a fine balancing point as we're trying to move forward and make it easier for people to adopt electric vehicles, to charge their electric vehicles. Obviously, one of the biggest challenges, people are like, no, I'm not going to get an EV. I don't know where to charge it. I've never seen any charging stations. I don't have charging in my apartment. I don't have workplace charging. But if you can solve some of that, you're really removing a lot of barriers. Streamlining permitting for charging installation is another one. Sharon Bonesteel at SRP did a masterful job in getting model home charging station drawings registered with the city of Phoenix, I think. I can't quite remember now who has that information down there, but she posted it there. So it's very easy to find the line drawings to put in residential EV charging. As we know, some city fleets are moving to electrify. Karen Apple is a fabulous, dedicated staff EV specialist. I know not everybody can do that. I know Danae wears a bunch of hats. EV specialist is one of them. And it's just another part of a job that you may already have a million things going on, but it helps to read, to find some resources, and to get a really good understanding. And frankly, I get most of my news and information from LinkedIn. I follow hashtags EV, electric vehicles, EV fleet, electrification, and up comes a whole lot of good reports and best practices that companies and people are doing. And I just get a wealth of information there. This is straight out of the statewide TE plan, which was presented to the Corporation Commission in a workshop last week. A lot of people gave a presentation during that workshop. You can find those presentations on the commission website, or if you ask me, I'm happy to send you the link. I put my email address up there in front, so feel free to write with me. Some of the working groups talked about what we could be doing. One of the things we will be doing is some EV collaborative meetings. Tucson will be doing them. We will be doing them. I know SRP has different types of collaborative meetings. My email, once again, is there. Actually, Devin Rude, who's a project manager, will be organizing those meetings. And it will also be part of our DSM collaborative, and it'll be a little separate part within there. So if you're interested in talking to APS about what they're doing, and I encourage you, if it's a different utility whose service territory you're in, to reach out to that utility to be included in what's going on. This is also from the statewide TE plan. We looked at 3 different scenarios: a low, medium, and high adoption scenario. With the medium adoption being something that the utilities, APS and TEP, felt like we could use successfully in our planning. I know that the high adoption scenario was advocated for by a lot of other stakeholders. I think one of the key messages is no matter what adoption scenario you are looking at, the number of charging stations that are going to need to be built and made available in the cities and towns across Arizona is huge. It's a big number. I tell my utility planners and construction people and real estate folks and attorneys, I'm like, I realize that maybe we struggle with understanding how we build these charging stations and get the permits done and get the contracting done and upgrade the service to it. But you have to realize this is going to be quadrupling in no time. So we need to figure it out. The cities need to figure out how to get the permits done quickly. There's going to be a huge need for public DC fast charging. So I feel like the more education we can give to people, I know even with my own company and I go talk to a group and maybe it's safety, maybe it's risk management. My first question is, do you drive an electric vehicle? And if nobody on that team drives an electric vehicle, it can be really hard to explain to them some of the challenges that they're going to be looking at and do a little myth busting as well. I know that some folks think a charging station is the same as a battery. And unless it's a battery with an integrated charging or charging station with an integrated battery, it's not, and it's not going to blow up. It's just a way to deliver electricity in a very safe manner. But there's a lot of educating that's going to need to be done with your facilities staff, with your transportation staff, with your street staff, building, parking. So there's just no end to the amount of education that can be done around a company to make people feel more comfortable with the idea of adding electric vehicles into their fleet, whether it's your own fleet or whether it's businesses that are sited in your cities and towns. I'm going to end this on one of my favorite places. I think this is Amsterdam, and he's driving an electric beer delivery truck, which I think is amazing. So hopefully I covered things that you guys were interested in, and I'm happy to delve more into other things you might be interested in if I know them. And hopefully if I don't know the answer, I can find you a reference that does. Thank you.